Hey everybody, welcome to Greg's Garage Pod with co-host Jason Pridmore. My name's Greg, and Jason is... Are you done with breakfast yet, dude? What are you doing over there?
I'm done. I'm great. I'm good, G-Dub. How are you today?
I'm good, man. Getting fired up for the MotoAmerica race weekend off of our summer break. We're back at it, and then we go fast and furious, don't we? We go like every other week until the end of the season.
Just slammed. And I was out at Buttonwillow this last weekend riding. So, yeah, mine started last weekend. I had a weekend off, and then I managed to try to fit my ankle and my other foot with a broken pinky toe into a boot this last weekend and got to go rip around. I'm a mess. Went out there. All the guys from track days were great. We had a fun 2 days. It was hot, really, really hot. And got to work with a couple of MotoAmerica people and had Andrew Lee and Michael Gilbert helping me, which was cool. But yeah, my I guess end of the year road tripping started last weekend.
Gotcha. Let's see. Last weekend was what? I think week 2 of 10 weekends in a row of travel for me.
Yeah,
So,
but yours is like between motorcycles and being Robin Hood. So
yeah, exactly. Working,
you know,
some archery work, some archery just competing, and I do have to go to a wedding in Colorado at the end of it. But that'll be
right.
fun. If rare is it I ever travel without doing something work related. So I don't know how I'm going to handle that. But during the past weekend, we had some racing, didn't we, Guy?
Man, it's weird because you and I haven't really done a proper podcast, and because there's not been a lot of racing, has there? But this weekend it was out there, and at one of my favorite tracks, no less. I mean, Brno in Czech Republic is, I don't know, it's one that doesn't get talked about openly, I guess, very often. But if you talk to the riders, they'll tell you it's one of their favorites, and it's always one that I look forward to watching because I've been there so many times. I've probably raced at Brno.
Have you golfed there, by the way? Because there's a golf course in the middle of the actual racetrack itselch. Because
I haven't.
2008, I was there doing the MotoGP race for CBS, and we got to do a stand up right in the middle of a putting. I want to say it was like the 8th hole. I can't remember though. And there was a jib, and it was how we opened the show. And it was that place is phenomenal. The race fans have to park so far away, and we had to get to the track at like 6 o'clock in the morning just to avoid like not being able to get into the racetrack. It was so packed with people, and the energy was ridiculous. As I'm doing my stand-up before the race, the hillside is just, lined with people, and they can't, hear really what I'm saying. But every time I would stop, they would just start cheering. And I was like, wow, this is how like a live studio audience is, huh? I got to get one of those shows,
That's great. Yeah, no, and you're right. It's the thing about Brno that's cool too, and I don't know if you remember this, but where you actually go out the main gate, you hook a right, and all of a sudden you're on this little twisty road that's just going through the woods. It's not like a normal, pull into a track and all of a sudden it's a big road. And like you say, they have to park so far away, but you just literally pull out of the track, you hook a right, and you're on this little 2-lane road that's just windy and twisty through the forest. It goes down a big hill as you go back down to the city center of Brno. And it's just a different place, isn't it? It's so cool though, all the ups and downs and the hills, and it's great spots.
My best memory of it, before we get onto the topic, is JD Beach winning the Red Bull Rookies Cup World Championship that weekend that I was there, and he had wrapped up the championship, and then I think he was 15 or 16 at the time, had no family, and we flew back together on the same plane from, I guess we flew out of Prague, and to Atlanta.
Fly to Vienna too in Austria. It's not too far away.
So we went to, I think it was Prague, and then we flew to Atlanta together, and we were talking, and then that was neat. So when we landed, I bought him his first meal, and then we were off. I went my direction, he went in his. But that was quite a spectacular year for JD. I can't believe that was 11 years ago already.
That's so crazy. Yeah, it's crazy, and it's the Red Bull Rookies Cup thing to me is when you talk about JD and you talk about Gagne and some of these guys that have gone through it. And, there was kind of a chance for some of our guys to get over there and stay there, and they just weren't able to. And, there's a couple more that are going to be trying out this year for Red Bull rookies that we'll probably talk about in future shows. But man, it's that time again where we need to get some of our kids over there if we can. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, we have the best chance we possibly can with a direct connection from Wayne Rainey into the MotoGP paddock. So, that is, I think, the biggest, I don't know, kind of shot in the arm is people look across the pond and they don't really see a lot of talent in the United States.
Yeah.
Not because we don't have it, but simply because the feeder systems in Italy and Spain are so incredibly strong. There's so many people coming through that system that they don't really need to pick their head up and look across the pond at the moment. So building that case is really critical, and who we send over there next, or who gets to go over there next, whether it's self-funded or something happens and gets good results, I think is going to be critical, because we've taken some hits over the years in terms of the talent that we have sent over to Europe, and it hasn't really made an impact, or it's made an impact in a negative direction. And that's probably why they're not looking here.
Right.
But there's plenty of young talent out there. There's no doubt, coming from the States. It's just a matter of getting in the right system, getting good results, getting recognized, and then, we're back on the
getting
map.
a shot.
Yeah.
Getting a shot to get over.
So Jay, MotoGP happened, and
Yep.
Well, let's go over the results real quick. I suppose it was Marc Marquez who won by 2.4 seconds on the actual timing sheets because he slowed down and all that. But Dovizioso was second. Jack Miller was third on the Pramac Ducati, and then you had Alex Rins on the Suzuki. Cal Crutchlow, Valentino Rossi was sixth. Quartararo was seventh, Petrucci eighth, Nakagami ninth, Vinales all the way back in 10th, Pol Espargaro on the Red Bull KTM in 11th, Bagnaia on the other Ducati, Pramac Ducati, in 12th, Miguel Oliveira in 13th, Johan Zarco in 14th, and Stefan Bradl, who is filling in. Then you had Rabat Iannone, Espargaro, Carol Abraham, and Sylvain Guintoli was in the mix. Your non-finishers are going to be Joan Mir, Franco Morbidelli, and Hafiz Sirene, who we know Sirene is off to Moto2 next year. So at least he's going to stay in racing. So, Jay, that was just a damn boring race, wasn't it? I mean, it was pretty boring.
It's great you said that, because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, we just talked about how Brno is such a great racetrack and it's this and that, but man, that race was just dull. It was just boring. And I think, I don't even like talking about our sport being boring at all, but it, like you said, he won by 2.5 seconds. It wasn't even that close. I mean, it was, I know he had like probably a 4-second lead towards the end there, 4 or 5 seconds. It wasn't that close. Really, the only drama you really had was Miller going to catch Rins. And for the first time I can remember in a long time, I actually read that Rins had, no grip left on the right side. The Suzuki's always been pretty good when it comes to kind of maintaining grip, maintaining, tire, and at this race, and it probably has something to do with all the ups and downs that Brno offers. What you don't realize on TV is how steep the hills are. When they talk about horsepower hill, the going up the hill before the last left, right. I know you went over there and you said you were over there doing some TV stuff, and you probably did you get to go around the track, Greg?
Oh yeah.
So you know how steep that is.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're on the right side of the tire and you're coming off a corner like that, it can definitely, obviously destroy tires. But Marquez is just, he's just too good, to be honest with you. There's nobody right now that can ride with him. I've heard a lot of the talks about, he's got to get on another brand now to prove his legacies and this and that.
What? Who says that? Who says that?
No, you just read, you read this stuff and you think to yourself, like, why would you switch? Why would you want, like, the kid doesn't have to prove anything to me. I mean, he's just incredible.
Wait a second. In what world does that comment even make any sense? That he's got to prove to other people that he's the best in the world or the GOAT or whatever if he jumps brands? Like, what difference would that make?
Well, I personally think too, Greg, that Tom Brady's not as good as he is unless he goes and plays for the Cleveland Browns. Then I'll believe he's good.
Hey, Jason, what's that hole underneath your nose? What's that hole under your nose? Is that your mouth? Keep it shut, pal. No, but I mean, right?
But it's true, though, right? Like, does that make him better if he goes to a different football team or something? Why?
Because you're going to make it harder for yourself. Because what you're going to change manufacturers. So you're going to go into an entirely new system, a new Japanese manufacturer. You as a rider have got to figure out, what's the structure? How does the team operate? Who do I need to talk to get what I need done to this? I mean, it's insane. It is. It makes no difference. The guy can ride. Whatever.
Now what they've done, what's happened this year is he's just got such a gigantic points lead that now he can just go out and freewheel it, which is, obviously the guy's multi-time world champion already. He doesn't feel the pressure that most of these other guys feel. He's been down this path before, and I think it's going to be a 9-race management. I mean, he's going to probably have the race wrapped up, the championship wrapped up 4 rounds before the end of, 4 to 5 rounds. I mean, his lead is just continuing to grow, and I think that it's going to be very difficult for them to not have him win the championship. What is it at, Greg? Now he's
63, I think. Are you talking about point-wise?
63 point lead. I mean, he could have this championship wrapped up after Thailand. Let's just say that means he's got 4 rounds left.
Yeah,
exactly. So, and that is, over Dovey, he's got 63. Then you tack on another 18 points behind that is Petrucci. So, I mean, this championship, barring any kind of obviously injuries or all of a sudden the bike blowing up every race week, and this championship's over. And Marquez is just going to continue to stomp his authority on how good he really is. And to be honest, Greg, he doesn't have an equal. He has, we've said it before on the podcast, he has no rival. Dovey finished second to him. Wasn't close. I was really surprised. There's a couple things I think were interesting. At the start of the race, Paul Espargaro was, the KTM guy. I mean, we saw Zarco qualify third in mixed conditions. He went straight to the back. Paul Espargaro took over that lead role of KTM, but it almost seemed to me, Greg, and tell me if you felt the same, but when Rossi and Crutchlow were behind Paul, I almost felt like they had pace to kind of go with those front 4, but they couldn't get by him.
Yeah, it kind of looked like that. It definitely looked like that. I mean, it wasn't the craziest pace I've ever seen out front. We've got to, though, go back, Jay, as everything I've read kind of points to something, which is the incredible amount of rain that they had during that race weekend kind of cleaned that track off. And the one thing that the Michelin needs, I mean, all tires need this, but it seems like the Michelin needs it more than, say, the Dunlops in the Moto2, Moto3 class, is it needs a lot of rubber in the asphalt, And for those that maybe don't understand, if you go look at tarmac, if you go look at asphalt, it's very porous. It has aggregate in it. And what happens when you first lay it down and it's brand new is that aggregate, or the holes that are also that are created by the aggregate in the asphalt, they're very sharp edged. And so as you get rubber in there, as the tires grip and it starts to fill those holes in the tarmac, it creates more grip. So it's just like it's like a layer of rubber on rubber. I mean, that's very oversimplified. But it's why we go to tracks and it takes a couple of years for those edges of that aggregate to wear off and the holes to get filled with rubber. Yeah, so the rain came and it was so pounding that it wasn't just water that like lifted up, because a lot of that rubber can stay there. It's the pounding rain that actually, like pressure washing it almost. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so that was a huge function. Michelin is saying, Jason, of like the Rins issue or the Paul Espargaro issue, which is not one of performance on the bike or even one of setup, although setup can be a problem because they didn't get as much dry time, but it came down to the tire performance itself. And what Michelin has said was that, say about 3/4 of the point of the race, there was enough rubber there on the race line where the performance settled in and you just had normal kind of wear. And I was like, I don't know about that. I don't know about all that. So
yeah, I agree with you. I just think that the lap times are really telling because, I went back and I looked at lap times from even 10 years ago, looked at some World Superbike stuff, because when I was watching the race, I was thinking, I felt like the Superbikes get down to, like 59s in 2 minutes and this and that. Because if you watch the pace at the front of this one, like it was like 58s. And the lap times themselves just didn't seem really fast. So you might be onto something in the sense that it wasn't as much grip, wasn't as much rubber on the track, that kind of thing. Because even back in, I looked at 2000, I looked 11 years ago, and in World Superbike stuff, and they were doing 2 minute point something around there, and World Superbike last year was doing kind of the same thing. So maybe we've just found the limits of that track, or whatever the case might be. But I didn't think the pace was I didn't think it was really that fast.
No, it wasn't all that fast, but there's, a lot of factors with that too. If you go back and look at Brno as a track, the fastest race time set was a 56 flat. And that was way back in 2014. And the all-time lap record was 2016 Marquez at a 154.5. Now, obviously Pole was a 2027, which was Marquez, doing crazy things on a wet/dry track on slicks. So that's really not it. But when you look at that race pace, like you're saying, this year, where you would expect, okay, further development, better electronics, and theoretically better tires,
Yeah.
Alex Rins was only able to do a 156.9. So still 9/10 of a second off of what Pedrosa did in 2014.
Yeah, crazy.
And you have to say, look, if Rins can do a 56.9 and have the fastest lap of the race, something else is wrong. It wasn't his setup. It wasn't him. You know what I mean? Something else had to play into being a factor of that. And all signs kind of point to not Michelin, but the Michelin or the race tire track combination of the weather and all that stuff. So, I just think it was, unfortunate situation.
Yes.
Now, on the Miller side of things, Jay, we got to talk about Jack Miller, because for Jack Miller, this was his best on the box performance, period. So he's been on the box before, but he's done it in rain and wet conditions. He also got on the box at COTA in the dry, but that was after Marquez had crashed out of the lead. So Jack would have been fourth, is what people were saying. So this was a straight up heads up fight. He reeled in Rins. He did all those things, and he was able to put on the box. And he was only 3.4 seconds behind Marquez at the end of the day.
Rode amazing.
Do you think that?
Rode amazing.
Do you think? Yeah, I was going to say, is that do you think this was the best performance we've seen from Miller so far?
Yeah, but I think if you look at overall race time and time behind leader, that is definitely something. I hate the thing you got to remember is Jack Miller rode just as hard at COTA to finish third, even though Marquez crashed. He rode just as hard there as he did here to finish third. I mean, it's, riders don't from one weekend to the other go, oh, I think I'm going to ride harder this weekend than that weekend. The fact that Marquez fell off is just what it was. There were some other guys, because if you look at it, like obviously the Yamaha at COTA with Rossi was pretty good and the Suzuki was pretty good. Rins beat both the guys that he had to beat, that he didn't get to beat there at COTA. I think that this was definitely a great race for him. It looks like he's going to be back with Pramac next year, because over the break we've heard that Petrucci is re-signed with the factory team. I think Miller, I don't know if he just continuously rides with a chip on his shoulder. I don't think he really does. I've only met him a couple times. Pretty happy-go-lucky guy, and I think he's got a pretty good home there. I think the bike is good, but to only be 3.4 back, and that carrot in front of him, Dovey there only finished a second ahead of him. That definitely was probably something that looks good to Ducati, looks good for Jack and his future. So I thought he rode amazing. I also thought Cal Crutchlow rode really well. He didn't get the best qualifying and kind of went backwards at the start, rolled through people pretty quickly, got by Rossi. For him to only finish 6 seconds back, he was running kind of the leader's times, but he lost a lot of time in those first couple of laps. I think, Greg, the other thing that you and I always talk about, we got to look at is the Yamahas again. Rossi's been nowhere for 4 Grand Prix in a row, pretty much.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now he's ninth. Yeah, he finishes 6th, but he's 9 seconds back. But he's the best of the Yamahas again. And Vinales is just a mystery again. 10th. I mean, he was running back at 16th and 18th at one point. Finds his way up in 10th spot at the end. And Quartararo ends up 7th. I just don't even know what to make of all of it. I know they've been testing some new stuff. I even saw where Vinales says, and they tested, this is another thing to bring to your argument, Greg, about the track being a little bit what it needs to be and with the Michelin tires and so on. But Vinales made a statement that he wants to go test the bike at a track that doesn't have very good grip. So it kind of says that Brno has decent grip.
No, it's got really good grip once the rubber gets laid down, as we saw.
Exactly.
We're going to talk about testing more later on in the show, but you can see it in the testing times. The times they were able to lay down the testing, and that was there was no rain Sunday night, so you had the full race and then all day testing. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, what about Zarco? Like, qualifies on the front row. I mean, dropped like a stone in the race, and I don't think that the fact that he finished 14th and he was. I mean, as far as him and Espargaro go, he was 12 seconds behind Espargaro. I don't think that's the real bad news for him. I think the bad news is that Miguel Oliveira is 8 seconds up the road ahead of him on his bike, on the Red Bull KTM Tech 3 bike. He's getting beat by Oliveira now too. So I don't even know what to make of Zarco at this point, other than he's just dying to probably get off that bike.
I wonder. I mean, You saw the qualifying and it was just like, like he'd won a Grand Prix, putting out in the front row.
Yep.
And I mean, I can appreciate, that they get on the front row. There's no points for any of that. It was weird
No.
conditions and all that kind of stuff. I thought it was a little kind of overdone. You know what I mean? But
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. Like, come on, let's remember where we're at here. That was half wet, half dry, and it's okay. I mean, you and I are, when you and I call our races, you and I are the first ones to just love the fact of seeing new people or new teams or new whatever get on the podium
yes.
or have a great qualifying result. You and I are so encouraging by that, but there does come a point, doesn't it, where it's like, okay, you guys, we are third, and that's great, but it's half wet, half dry. It's one of those things. I mean, and the fact that there was no backing it up in the race, there was zero.
That's what I'm saying. And he had all the
I agree with
he
you
had all the
100%,
advantage.
yeah.
That's the thing. So the one thing we do know, at least in the conditions that we had, in terms of like the racetrack conditions or whatever, that even given Johann Zarco the benefit of starting on the front row, it didn't really do anything for him.
No,
where
nothing.
There are riders out there that if they could get a better qualifying position, they can do the pace, then you would see that 14th become a 9th or a 10th. You know what I'm saying? By starting on those rows. So, but I think MotoGP too, the length of the race being an average of like 42, I think, to 45 minutes long, I think it tends to sift itself out a little bit better than some shorter sprint races.
Agreed. Yeah, no, it does. And it goes again this weekend. I was watching the race and I got into a discussion with somebody about Aprilia.
Oh boy.
And I sit there and I think, I just don't even know why they're doing it. Like Iannone actually beat Espargaro this week, barely. I mean, beat him by 0.2, but things run around in 17th and 18th spot. And
I'm not giving up on him.
I'm not giving up on him. But what's got to change there? What has to change? Something's got to change.
But they made a change just a few months ago, right? By adding personnel, taking, like an overloaded person, the job of an overloaded person, and dividing that up. I just think it takes time. I think that, I hate to say this for the Aprilia racing team, Grassini, but I'm going to give them the rest of the season. And if they don't come out swinging in testing, an off-season testing, and start to be competitive, then I'm going to take a look at the panic button. But it does take time.
But what do you do? What I'm saying is, what is this next step? I mean, you think about it, like, I actually really rate Aleix. I think he's great.
Yeah.
Iannone, I think, is great too. I just think he's a little bit, what's the word? Maybe scattered a little bit. He's not really as focused as he could be. I don't even know the guy, and I'm saying that, so I could just be full of it myself. But I say overall that Iannone he's a Grand Prix winner just a couple of years ago. He's proven himself. I mean, he came good on that Suzuki towards the end, but by then it was too late. I mean, he doesn't seem that inspired. And, I'm looking at a bike that's finishing almost 40 seconds behind. They're racing against each other, and they're together on the racetrack.
Which proves what, Jay? Which proves what? They're
getting the limit out of that bike. With the riders they have on it, they're getting the limit out of it, aren't they, Greg? So You sit there and you think, what's got to change? Is it the engineers? Is it the crew chiefs? Is it the bike? I mean, the bike's obviously got to get better. Is it the riders? You, as a rider, I don't like to blame the riders. I think that you're only as good as the equipment you have underneath you. But I sit there and I think these guys are getting beat by 15 seconds from a Red Bull KTM, of Miguel Oliveira. It just doesn't seem like it makes sense to me. I don't know, and I don't know what the solution is.
I don't know either, but it's probably a bunch of stuff, and it's hard in the middle of a Grand Prix racing season, even with the summer break that they had, to just dive into your program and start making changes. And I think it's who's ever in place now has got to have a longer term plan. And I think that you might see some people moved around, maybe fired, maybe added to the team at the end of the season, but you got to run with what you have now. I mean, now is the time. They had testing on Monday. We'll talk more about that again later on, but and then they have another couple tests scheduled over the remainder. So you start to see some 2020 stuff starting to appear. So these are bits and pieces, especially anything engine. You can't. I mean, what you started the year with is what you have to finish the year with in terms of engine configuration. So what you have is what you have. So if you see engine, if you see some things, you're already looking at 2020. And I have to imagine that Aprilia's eyes right now are just focused 100% on 2020 because 19 is a complete wash,
Yep. Yep.
So that's kind of what I see for them. Um,
No, I
yeah,
agree.
it's
I agree. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And man, the fact that they still have 9 races left is just is incredible. But the championship as we know it is kind of over. I just hope that we get to see some really good racing. They're going to a great track this next week. A1 Ring in Austria is simply, it's probably the most beautiful place I've ever been. Again, I was lucky enough to race there as well. And it has some very cool idiosyncrasies about it, the uphills and things, but it's been pretty much a Ducati track. I think it's going to change this weekend. I don't think anybody's going to beat Marquez. I think he's got close to beating those guys the last 2 years. I think with the improved speed of the Honda, and now he's riding absolutely free. I don't see anybody beating him. I think it's going to take something crazy to beat Marquez this year. So let's go to Moto2, Greg. We had I just can't say it enough. I think that Alex Marquez has really come good this year. I don't know if it's somebody was asking me again about like why you think he's come good this year. It could be the fact that they've changed bikes, motors, with the Triumph itself. But we saw Sam Lowe's get a good start. Marquez got by him pretty much in a few corners and just split. And he was never even really pressured. I was so pumped to see Fabio Di Giannantonio move himself into second and run a great race. Luthi, who is one of our main championship guys, had a really strange crash. He crashed very early in the race, 16 laps to go. We saw Luca Marini up there as well, who obviously, we talk about it a little bit. His riding style reminds us a little bit of Ben Spies back in the day with his elbows up. But I think he's a kid that a lot of us expected to be further up there and winning some races this year. He was up there and things, but the last lap, we did get to see a little bit of action between Navarro and Enea Bastianini, who
that kind
another
of
kid
that kind of saved the race, though, didn't it?
It did. It did because, and it was good to see. It was good to see Di Giannantonio and Bastianini come from Moto3, 2 title contenders in the past. From there, they've moved to Moto2, and they're making an immediate impact. The fact that they're both on the podium in this race, I thought was great. It kind of brings some of that new blood along, because to be quite fair, we haven't even mentioned Jorge Martin, the current Moto3 world champion. We really haven't even mentioned him this year, Greg. So just a quick rundown of the results. Marquez, Di Giannantonio, Bastianini were your top 3. Navarro, Luca Marini, and Marcel Schroeder, with Nico Bulaga, who is we've heard is out at the Sky Racing VR46 team going into next year. He was 7th. Augusto Fernandez, Nagashima, and Iker Lecuona, who is going to be taking Brad Binder's place next year at KTM. So he's got the upgrade going for next year. He was rounding out the top 10, albeit 19 seconds back on the American Racing KTM. And then you got Baldassari, Marco Bezzecchi, Jorge Martin, who I previously mentioned. I mean, he was back there in 13th. Locatelli and Chantra rounded out the top 15. A couple non-points guys, which is really crazy. But you look at it, it's Remy. I see Remy Gardner back there, non-finisher, points finisher. How about Jonas Folger? Jonas Folger. He's no points. And then, of course, the non-finishers, Binder, Sam Lowe's, rough weekend again, Passini, Luthi, who's the big one as far as the points goes. But when you look at the guy out front, 3-second win for Marquez, it just seems like he's untouchable, isn't he? I mean, he's gotten to be like his brother. I mean, that's got to be a pretty fun household to hang out in right now.
Marc Marquez, if you read a lot of the interviews that he does when he gets to talking about his brother, he said, that he actually felt that he was more happy for his brother's win than for his own win. But one of the comments that he's made, if you read between the lines, is he really thinks that Alex has started to get his head together. Like, I think the thing with Alex is that he wasn't happy unless he was winning. Like, it was like win at all cost. And now it's kind of, hey, let me dial it back a bit. And he worked towards it with the new bike. And I think he's on a good chassis. I mean, Kalex obviously is the best of the class if you look at the results. So he's on a good chassis. He's on with the Mark VDS team, a great team. But, Jay, maybe it is the fact that now they've introduced electronics to this whole situation. Maybe Alex Marquez is just designed and intelligent enough to really work with these electronics that the bikes didn't have before. So you have the extra motor of the Triumph 765. And then on top of that, you have an electronic strategy now that these riders are working with. Maybe it's just a combination that's really working for him. But
Yep.
I really like watching him race. And one of the comments, though, that Marc Marquez said about Alex was that it's going to be interesting to see what his brother does. I'm paraphrasing, but it's going to be interesting to see what his brother does on the days he can't win. So that's kind of a telling sign to me about where Alex's head has been in the past and where his head might be now. And of course, there is this rumor that is floating around the atmosphere that has the potential of Alex Marquez joining his brother on the Repsol MotoGP team next year, which would be totally sick. Wow. I mean, I think that'd be cool. But anyway,
it would be at this point. I mean, we don't even talk about the guy anymore, and I got nothing but respect for him. But when do you get to the stage where you go up to Lorenzo and hand him a bucket of money and just kind of let that ship sail? He's hurt after, and nobody is here to question how hurt he really is. But, I've seen a lot of guys get back on bikes that are pretty beat up, especially when they need to, because they're, you hate to think that a guy of his level has got to fight for a ride, especially if he still wants to do it. But I just don't know how motivated he is. Even when he's on the Honda right now, he's getting smoked. And we saw this with him on the Ducati, but man, now you got Alex Marquez. You got to think that, Repsol being Spanish, obviously having the Marquez brothers on the same team and really feeling now that it's a legitimate, he's earned it now, hasn't he? I mean, you got to remember, Greg, just two races ago, when he was taken out by Baldassarri, it closed the championship completely back up. And now all of a sudden he's sitting on a 32, 33 point lead. He's got a full race under his belt. And that's because some of the guys that were close to him in the points, Luthi specifically, crashed out of this race. But now he's got that 25 plus point points gap that you kind of look at as a rider and think, okay, I got a full race lead. And he's been at the front of every one of these races. Like it's not as if he's been winning these races by default. He's been leading. I've seen a definite change in his riding style as well. If you watch him ride, and if you watch a lot of the top guys now, even D'Antonio this weekend, Bastianini, kind of, it seems like with the Triumph, a lot of the major backing in style has gone away. It doesn't seem like it's as prevalent as it has been. Marquez's style is very flowy now. Almost doesn't lean off the bike as much as he did before. It just looks effortless, and he just walks away from guys. And now he's got a full race lead. I don't see anybody really catching him again either, unless there's some big problems, because he just looks like he's got the pace. He sets the pace. He's on pole positions and this and that every weekend. And he would earn that spot in MotoGP now, as opposed to getting it and people thinking to themselves, well, it's because his brother's there,
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Especially now, I mean, I think he's practically equaled his win total before he even came into the season in Moto2. I think he's like equaled it or gotten one better. It's not like he had 15 wins over his career in Moto2, and now he's starting to win again. He only had a few. I think he only had 5 maybe?
Yep.
I think coming into this
No,
season.
You're right. And the talk was he was always getting smoked by his teammates every year. And I mean, you look at the guys that have gone through there from, Bagnaya's gone through that team. There's a list of guys that have been before him that have beat him, that have just moved on and gone on to better and bigger things. And but now it seems like it's his turn. It just seems like he's the guy in Moto2. Because, Greg, I can't really think of anybody else in Moto2 right now that I'd be in a hurry to move up. But I could have said that about Quartararo at the end of last year. I wouldn't have moved him up either. And look how stupid I would look now. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. Totally. Yeah. Hey, did you see that Steve Odendahl? Did you see his save, by the way?
I did.
The South African. He finished 22nd, but was that in qualifying, or
it was in
one
of
the practice sessions? Yeah. If you didn't see it online, you got to go to MotoGP and check it out. I mean, he basically high-sided off the bike, but held on to it. So he was on the left side of the bike surfing on the asphalt. Initially,
Unreal.
his toes were behind him, and he had the mind. The bike was leaning off to the right, too, and I thought, oh, man, don't let it go or it's going to flop down.
Yep.
He had the right mind to get his feet in front of him, and it was like a cartoon where he was digging his heels in, trying to slow the bike down and on the brakes. And that was an amazing save. An amazing save.
And it prompted MotoGP.com to come up with a list of all the great saves in the past. So it's an interesting watch. I got to see a little bit of it. Yeah, I haven't got to see all of it, but I watched a little bit of it. But but then a shout out also to Joe Roberts. I know Joe. I just kind of hit him up on Instagram this morning, and he's just recovering. He's dislocated his collarbone. So shout out to him, and hoping that he's getting better. And because we didn't get to see him in the race at all over the weekend. So.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, kind of.
But the bottom line on the Moto2 race is that Alex Marquez put on a clinic, but for a racing position, it got pretty slow until 2 laps to go, and Bastianini and Navarro were able to race it up. Shout out to Speed Up too. There's only 2 Speed Up chassis, in the race, Jay, and they finished 2 and 4, so they've been hard at work. Where KTM's best result is, I think it was Lickawana in 10th spot. So KTM still with work to do. With Brad Binder out, who had been kind of their premier rider. So,
and he wasn't even close either, though. He wasn't even close, was he? I mean, when he fell, he was so far back at that point. So,
Yep. Yeah. But unfortunately, the woes continue for Sam Lowes, who we'd love to talk about. Such a great guy, and hopefully he'll be able to stop this mad string of crashes. For the kids. So,
yeah, and they had mentioned that ride looks like it's. I think that ride, they were talking about it possibly being Bulaga that might jump on that bike next year, if I'm not mistaken. I could have that wrong, Greg, but I believe that's what they were saying on TV anyways, that he's kind of lined up to go to the Grassini team and that Sam isn't going to be on that ride next year. So hopefully he can find something. And, there's just, it's just a matter, as a rider, everybody's got pace. All these guys have pace and everybody's pushing. But there's a point where you've got to finish races. You have to get some sort of result. You have to get some sort of, even if it's a 10th or 11th or something that the team can build on. You've got to be able to do that. So, hopefully we can see Sam on a bike next year that he can kind of reset himself a little bit possibly and start over again. So.
Well, speaking of finishing races, in the Moto3 class, Aaron Canet ended up winning this one and retakes the championship points lead in what was, yet again, an incredible race. 10 riders finishing within 1.7 seconds of each other, and it was really closer than that up until that last lap. But let's talk some Moto3, Jay, because in the results, it was Aaron Canet, Lorenzo Dalla Porta, who finished second, Arbolino in third, Masia in fourth. Hey, Masia finished. Antonelli in fifth. Ogura, my boy, in sixth.
Yep.
We're tight. Yep. I think we had the same gym teacher in high school. Migno in seventh. Fanati, Kornfeld, who I thought, obviously a lot of people thought the way Jakob Kornfeld came into this one and that it was his home race, that it would be a little bit more special for him, but ninth place. Darren Binder in 10th place, finishing a race. Sasaki in 11th, Fernandez, Yurchenko, Jan Anju, and then Foggia rounding out your top 15. There's some decent names that didn't finish this race. Shocker of all time is that Tatsuki Suzuki didn't finish again. Another big crash for Suzuki. Garcia out. Toba, who was our early, after the first race championship points leader, out of this one. Alonso Lopez crashed out. We'll talk more about that one a little later on. But
Yep.
All right, so margin of victory in this one, Jason, just a tenth of a second. Aaron Canet, solo rider for that Max Biaggi racing team on the KTM, gets it done, retakes the championship lead. The 19-year-old, your assessment of his race?
Unbelievable. The kid is coming to his own this year. Last 2 years, we've been pretty critical of him. I have anyways, because I've seen him just do some things that just don't seem like his head is on the right way. And I think this really goes to show you, Greg, that when you get a guy like a Max Biaggi, a former world champion, a guy with a lot of history, a lot of experience, you get a guy like him and with a young man who obviously has talent. If you have watched it, and it's not the first time we've talked about this year, Aaron Canet, this race specifically, you know what's great about these races is not just the closeness of it, but when we see the helicopter views and you watch you look for a certain person, and he's very identifiable in the orange and white and black. And Greg, the whole race, he sat there in fourth, fifth, sixth, kind of jumped up to third and second. It's almost like a way of like, okay, I got to make a little push, get myself back up front, let a couple guys go by, and then get myself back up front. Never letting himself get too far back. But he just doesn't let anything frazzle him around the front of the race. He just kind of keeps himself in a good spot, keeps his nose clean, and doesn't really do anything. But with 3 to go, there's something that says, all right, it's time to do it. And the last lap, like you said, he won this race by 0.1 of a second, but it wasn't really that close because he didn't ever let anybody get near him towards the end on the last lap. Once he took the lead, those guys were never close enough to him. Were they? He cleaned a couple of spots that he had to absolutely clean. Mainly the right-hander going up to Horsepower Hill with 2 corners to go. They couldn't do anything with him. He rode perfect.
Yeah, it's great. And he deserves the championship lead after that performance in what is an absolute melee to the checkered flag. And it's just so interesting to watch how he just doesn't get hectic, in the mix. And, after the race, I was looking at Twitter and I was watching what Iogura had to say about it, and his comment, he's a rookie in the class, and his comment was, it's so difficult when you're in 6th place on the last lap to figure out how to move forward from 6th place.
Yep.
And, it's one of those things where I really started thinking about it. And I'm like, Aaron Canet put himself in that position early on where he was in the middle of the pack, just doing his thing, and then just started to make all the right moves. But Jay, I mean, you're obviously have a lot of racing in your life and at a top level. I just can't imagine sometimes having these younger riders being able to sort themselves out in the middle of a race where there's 10 people that are all going back and forth. I mean, if your focus is on going forward, you've got to be thinking about what's going on behind you too. And in this class, what's going on to the side of you as well. It's
couldn't
crazy,
agree more.
Right?
When you look at a class like this, you're looking at a lot of young men that I don't know how you'd explain it. They haven't, luckily, hopefully they never do, but they haven't had the big injuries. They haven't had the big things. I mean, there's a few of them that have, but there's so much aggressiveness in this class. And the bikes are so light and nimble that they turn and they move and they twitch and they do all these things. And when you watch this race, to be able to try to plan it is almost impossible. So like what you say about Iogura, I almost can try to put yourself in that position. It's the last lap of the race. Your team's on the wall, begging you to move forward. You're 6th.
Yeah, right.
But where do you go? Everywhere you go, there's a bike. So this is what I mean that's made Canet look so amazing to me this year, is that he always just figures out a way to push himself forward. I mean, I've seen it at Misano. Not Misano, I'm sorry, Greg. Where was it this year where he, I'm trying to think now. He pushed Toba basically out of the way with 2 or 3 corners to go to get himself up to the front.
A couple races ago. Yeah.
Was it Assen? Might have been Assen.
Mm-hmm.
But he just, the franticness that this race is, to be able to see the same guys kind of being up at the front. And you look at a couple things. You look at Raul Fernandez. He's a rookie this year in that class. He led this race at one point. He ends up finishing 12th. You look at Canon Chu. He was up in that lead group, 6th place at one point. He ends up finishing 14th. Only 5.5 seconds back, but he's 14th. You look at just about any series in the world, if you finish 14th, you're a lot further back than 5.5 seconds.
Agreed.
So you think about all the chaos that's just going on there. I mean, even Darren Binder, when you see him coming to the front, his size and who he is and kind of where we've seen his aggressiveness and things, he kind of pushed his way to the front with 4 or 5 to go. He was up to 2nd, and he ends up 10th, 1.7 back. It's just a matter of being in the right place at the right time. But when you see somebody consistently doing it the way that Aaron Canet is doing it, the way that De La Porta seems to always be doing it, they are the class of the field. That's why they finished 1-2. That's why they're 1-2 in the championship. But yeah, just crazy racing.
Jason, let me take you back to the start of the race. John McPhee gets going. Bike doesn't work. Hand goes in the air. Then he takes his hand down without all the bikes going by, starts to try to mess around with something on the dashboard. What we found out later was he felt like that the pit lane speed limiter was active and he couldn't get the bike to go. Ugh. And then, the last rider it was like one of the last riders that would have gotten around him, absolutely clobbered him. Yeah. How scary was that moment for you as a rider watching that unfold?
Well, you're talking about, it was a Japanese rider, Yuki I'm not sure I say his last name, but
Oh yeah,
horrifying.
Cooney, I believe.
Cooney,
Yuki
yeah.
Cooney. Yeah,
It's horrifying. Did you see it from the on-camera view of McPhee's bike?
I did. Yeah,
It's
that
so
was really.
scary. And, I had one time in my life where my bike didn't go at the start, and it was my own fault for even lining up because I'd had trouble with it off the line and sliding lap and warm-up lap. And I actually just recently found a picture of me there on the grid, and I've got my arm in the air. So the race has started. I got bikes going by me, and it's horrifying. And it that's just sitting there. The fact that McPhee, he had his hand in the air and he's rolling, he's actually going and still got hit. But you got to remember on these Moto3 bikes, what's the most important part about these guys on their bikes on straightaways? Aerodynamics.
Draft.
They're,
Yeah.
The second that they start, they're in a tuck. They're in a tuck immediately. So their vision is literally gone from sitting above the bubble and having maybe a little bit wider spectrum of visual to now it's tucked in behind the bubble, not as maybe can't see as much, can't see up ahead of you as far. You see bikes swerving out of the way. But in this instance, Yuki just didn't quite catch that McPhee had, was going such a slow amount of speed, slower, and clobbered him. Scary stuff. And it was just great to see him get up. Never heard if it looked like he was holding his wrist, Greg, I think.
Cooney.
Yeah, which is normal in that case because a lot of times your hands and your wrists and things are a little bit exposed outside the fairings, and so they get jammed and they, you could break your hand or wrist or so on.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully he's okay. And it also looked like McPhee, I know it broke off his foot peg, but it looked like his left leg probably took a little bit of a clattering from that as well. So a front runner who didn't get to even do a lap.
Yeah, that was a real shame, and it was scary.
Yeah.
You remember the
Really
James?
scary.
You remember the James Randolph incident during World Superbike at Laguna?
Oh yeah, horrible.
Same type of situation where he started from the back and he had his head down and he just had his head down and you're going up a hill and who was it that he?
There was I kept trying to think who it was, Greg, and we have
was
to
it
go
a
back.
Honda? Was it Aaron Slight? No, it wasn't that far back.
It was one of those guys. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was a big name World Superbike guy.
Yeah,
I wish I could remember who it was, but it was horrific.
Wasn't Caroline Olsen involved in something like that too?
She was involved in something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Road
part of it.
The starting line crashes are the worst.
They're horrible. Yeah.
Because you got this big gigantic field of people together, and it's just I mean, even to this day, I mean, I watched the start of races, and man, the first thing I think my eye always trains itself to when you and I are calling the races is I just making sure everybody gets away at like a normal speed. I don't like to see that person in the second or third row have such a bad start where like you say, like a bike getting stuck on the pit lane speed limiter or whatever it is, because you just fear for them. We want to see grids of 30, 40 riders. But man, it's very sketch. And I think that the staggered start thing is a little bit better. That we've gone to these staggered starts, but it's still scary, and we saw it again this weekend where it can happen.
Yep. But anyway, Moto3 is always fun to watch. The racing was incredible. It rarely ever disappoints. So nice and tight in that championship now, and make sure you're watching Moto3 now. Jay, let's move on to the test because the MotoGP team stayed and they got to test on Monday. And some of the teams rolled out some new stuff. Some teams didn't really do much. So let's try to sum it up, I guess, the best we can. Yamaha, well, they came with some new fairings and some minor engine updates. Suzuki, Rins tried some new aero stuff. He tried a new frame and a swing arm. Now, most of this stuff we're talking about is going to be for 2020. Some of this stuff can be implemented immediately. Jack Miller tried that new aero part of the fairing. I don't know if you watch the race, you could see that they even had an isolated little slow-mo picture or video of the new aero that was on Dovizioso's bike.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Miller got to try that. Both Marquez and Crutchlow got to try Honda's new chassis. And what they're looking for is like less stress on the front tire. And they also have a new aerodynamics package that if the data supports that it worked better than what they had, then they'll run that at the next race, this coming up weekend at Red Bull Ring. Ducati didn't do much, Jay. I mean, they just had some aero stuff to more evaluate and you know what I mean, but nothing really to test. And they had, Michelin brought some new tires. Now, the result of that, go ahead.
No, I want to ask you a question on that real quick. I'm asking for your opinion on something, okay?
Yep.
Who do you feel has pushed in the last 3 years specifically? Who do you think has pushed technology in MotoGP the furthest?
No, 100% Ducati. I mean,
Okay,
there's
so
no, yeah.
I agree with you, and so the fact that Ducati doesn't really have a lot to test kind of shows you that they're the ones that set the precedent of the aerodynamics. I think when Gigi D'Alina got in there was a lot of things that he wanted to change about that. And where I'm going with this is, it seems to me that it, it goes down this line of, when you find technological advancements to be an advantage, you have to take advantage of them when you can. And now all these other manufacturers have caught up to what Ducati has done. And that's why I feel like Ducati hasn't got a lot more to really add to things, let's just say, right this second, because they were the ones that kind of set the bar, I believe. Um, not unlike their World Superbike this year. I think that they kind of set the bar. Like, everybody went, "Whoa, look at this new Ducati, and it's amazing, and it's just come out and smoked everybody at the beginning of the year, and it's done its job." The hardest part for me is they haven't got a lot to show for it, because they've made these big technological advances, but it doesn't look like they're going to win World Superbike, and they're not winning MotoGP championship. And now everybody's caught up to them a little bit, haven't they? It would seem. And
Yes,
so you gotta worry a little bit about that, I would think.
I agree. But do you remember how who did Suzuki lose? Iannone? We were talking
Yep.
last year.
Yep.
And we were concerned about Suzuki's test, like how they're going to test. Can Rins carry the development of the bike? Is Joan Mir going to help them out? What about Gintoli? You know what I mean? Is he fast enough to help develop? I think what we were ignoring a little bit was the fact that Lorenzo's gone. And
Yep.
Dovizioso has never been known as like some phenomenal test guy,
Agreed.
like a development direction. And Petrucci obviously was just hanging on for dear life, to get that contract. I don't think that he was in the mindset of I'm the A rider, I'm going to develop. No, Dovizioso's the A rider, right? So
yeah.
So I to add to exactly what you're saying, I think the long-term problem for Ducati seems to be more along the lines of, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Great, because it still comes down to, you got to have a motorcycle that can accelerate and turn at the same time, and have stability under braking, and be able to keep the front wheel on the ground. And Dovizioso said in an interview, I think it was on gp1.com or something, just a little quick thing saying, like, they do have something coming, but right now they're just don't have it available for this test for 2020. Mm-hmm. And, it's about, how the suppliers and who's available and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I agree with you on that, Jade. Like, no matter how many electronic gizmos, a device that squats and allows you to do this, and you put this thing underneath the swing arm for aero, and blah 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 blah. The bike still has to be a motorcycle. It still has to be a motorcycle that can turn and do all the things a motorcycle does.
Yeah, because I looked this weekend too, and it's been like this at most of the races. When you go and you actually look at like top speed, for instance, and when you looked at the top speeds, now the Honda is as fast. Like this weekend, it's relatively nothing, 164.5 to 164.3, but the Ducati, and it has genuinely had the top speed advantage, and it doesn't anymore. And it could be because of the aero, it could be because of the bike not wheeling as much. It could be a number of reasons of why, but now that has stepped forward, Ducati has kind of lost. We know that Ducati has always been kind of the fastest bike. That's why when they go to A1 Ring this weekend, it's a lot of big, fast, wide open, up these big steep hills and things, and it's shown itself. And Marquez has done everything he can to kind of stay with them. And I believe that now the Honda has closed the gap, and it's almost just seems to me that everybody's closed the gap. The Suzuki's gotten a little bit better. Maybe the Suzuki's gotten a little bit quicker, because even though this weekend it wasn't quite to where the Ducati and the Honda were, it definitely has shown some of its speed. But maybe that's why the tires went off a little bit this weekend on Rins. Who knows? But I think that when they go testing right now, right this second, and you've put this in our notes, as Ducati didn't do much. They evaluated some aero stuff and the new Michelin tires, but they didn't really do much. And I think it's because they have literally set the standard, and these other guys are now catching up. And you followed my lead on this without us even talking about it. Where is that next step going to be, and who really is going to be the guy to help them push that thing through? Because I think Lorenzo was a main guy over the last 2 years to really see that Ducati kind of get to that next spot.
Mm-hmm. By the way, in testing, it was like a Yamaha affair up front. You had Quartararo led the way with a 55.6, Vinales right behind him with a 55.6, Morbidelli at a 55.7, then Rins ticked off a 50, excuse me, a 55.8.
Mm-hmm.
Crutchlow was there. Rossi was 6th. So you're talking about 4 of the Yamahas, all the factory bikes in essence, because Petronas Yamaha are basically the same thing. Where were they in the race? That's the big question. Then you had Mir, who had a huge crash, by the way. I don't know if you heard about his big crash. Turn 1, and he launched
didn't turn
it.
1, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, turn 1. Yep. So I think he bruised up his lung. He said, what I read was that initially he couldn't breathe, and then it got better. So he says he's going to be fit and ready to go for Red Bull Ring. Marquez was 8th. Then you had Bagnaia and Petrucci and Takaaki Nakagami. I'm not sure what bike he was on. I guess he's still on the same bike. And then Dovizioso. So you're looking at, 10th and 12th for Ducati.
Yeah.
So there's some moves being made. I was surprised that Cyrene, who's gone off that Red Bull KTM Tech 3 bike, he got to test. But, it's kind of a mid-season test. It's not really a 2020 development test. So I'm sure it was just another opportunity for a lot of riders to get out there and try something. But, Andrea Iannone, the slowest 58 flat.
Yeah.
I mean, 2.4 seconds behind in a test.
Just brutal. So, yeah.
It's a bummer. My heart breaks for Aprilia at the moment. I know Bradley Smith and those guys are working hard to try to come up with solutions and stuff like that. But so interesting on the test, and then they're going to go right to the Red Bull Ring. And that's that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we'll see how that pans itself out. I think we got a short week, Greg, because you and I are going to be busy on our podcast next weekend. There's no question, because we got MotoAmerica this weekend in Sonoma. For those that missed it, we did our special Sonoma MotoAmerica show last week, so that's been out for some time. So we've got that, but then we're gonna obviously next week we'll be talking about MotoGP as well in Austria and so on. But I want to go back real quick, Greg, to something that happened a couple of weeks ago. We didn't get to chat about it just yet, but probably I think over the years we've heard so many people talk about the most important race of the year is the Suzuka 8-hour, and this year and over the past 2 or 3 years we've got quite a rivalry going, and it's become a race where it's starting to get the notoriety back to where it used to be. This race, Greg, when I was a kid, every MotoGP rider would do this race. From the McDowans to the Kenny Robertses, and even moving forward, Rossi was doing it. Colin Edwards was doing it. Nicky Hayden did it. You just go down the list of the greats that have been in that race of what the Suzuka 8-hour is. But
explain what the Suzuka 8-hour is, though, Jay, for people that may not know about it.
A Suzuka 8-hour has been around, I believe, since the late 70s. Okay, and if you go back and you look at race results, it's a who's who of one that has won this race. It's part of the World Endurance Championship, and it's ran in Japan at the Suzuka Circuit, which is one of my favorites. And basically, it's a place for the Japanese manufacturers to showcase their motorcycles, and you see the trickiest bikes, the coolest bikes that you see. In fact, when the World Endurance regulars go to this race, it's not. I can't really say, Greg, that it's a fair fight, because you get a lot of one-offs in the Suzuka 8-hour, like the factory Kawasaki's and the Yamahas and the Hondas and things. They are different than any other bikes that they're racing in any series in the world. For instance, the Yamaha and the Kawasaki, they're running on Bridgestone tires. They're running MotoGP electronics. So it's a lot different than the bikes that they're running in World Superbike. So this is really a case of it's a very, very special one-off race that if you've never, if honestly, if you had to go to like a Motegi MotoGP race or go to the Suzuka 8-hour as your two choices, I would tell you to go to the 8-hour and experience it because it's just that much different, and the enthusiasm behind it is amazing. But what it really does is it kind of jumpstarts the thoughts of what you might start to see on 2020 bikes. Like, for instance, the coming year, whatever it's going to be, you might start to see some bits on bikes that could be on 2020 spec bikes because they're testing a lot of things. And they take this race beyond serious.
So it's an 8-hour race. There's what, 2 to 3 riders per team? 3
riders max.
Okay.
2 riders is and I always told people in the past that I would much rather do the Le Mans 24-hour or the Bull d'Or 24-hour with 3 riders than to do the Suzuka 8-hour with just 2. It's the most grueling race ever. It's ran at the end of July in Japan. Obviously, it's the humidity and the heat are second to nothing that I've ever been around. I was at Buttonwillow, like I said earlier, this last weekend, and it was hot. It was really hot. It was 100 plus. But for whatever reason, Greg, after you go to Suzuka, it's it's really hard to complain about the heat anywhere else you go. We've had a couple of times. I remember one year you and I in Loudon, New Hampshire, when it was just obscenely hot, where the tarmac was actually melting to your shoes, if you remember, out in pit lane.
Oh, yeah.
But then on the other side of it, Barber's been pretty bad, but we're not racing at those tracks for 8 hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you do a sprint race and yeah, it's grueling, but imagine having to sit out for an hour and then getting back on the bike and doing another hour. It's a different type of mentality. It's a different type of race.
So what happened this year with the finish? It's crazy.
Let's look at the results to start with. Kawasaki won with Johnny Ray and Leon Haslam. Toprak Rizgatioglu was scheduled to ride, but they only went with a 2-rider lineup with Haslam and Ray. I hear mostly because there were some things about the bike that, maybe Toprak wasn't as comfortable, as well as experience. To ride an endurance race is a little different mentality than a sprint race. Then you had Nagasuga, Lowe's, and Vandermark on the factory Yamaha. And then, a really good effort from Takahashi, Kianari, and Bradl and Takahashi. Takahashi now, I believe, is the current Japanese Superbike champion, and was amazing to watch. I watched 6 of the 8 hours. The controversy about this race is really why we wanted to bring up the results. With about this race, Greg, runs into the night. So they start it during the day. It runs into the night. The last hour and a half or so are at night. And during the race, with about 10 minutes to go, 20 minutes to go, it started to sprinkle, a little bit of rain. But the CERT team, the Suzuki Endurance Racing Team, who are actually up, this is a whole nother side project that we'll talk about in a second. But Suzuki Endurance Racing were running 8th or 9th in the race, on par to win their another championship. SRC Kawasaki was running 2nd in the championship, and they were the benefactors because CERT blew up. Their motor blew. They oiled up the track a little bit, it sounds like. And with 5 minutes to go, Johnny Ray ends up crashing from a 20-second lead. Basically, in my experience with endurance, Greg, I've never, not one time in my life, seen a red flag. So you think about how many years I did World Endurance, right?
Yeah, so no red flag. So how do they handle it then when something happens?
7 years I did World Endurance. I never saw a red flag. Wow. Well, what they ended up doing is they threw a red flag. Generally, in any situation, they're going to bring a pace car out. And I have literally looked to try to find more information on this. But from the best of my knowledge, and from what I've been told, Johnny, unfortunately, was the only one that tipped off. Out of all the riders that were on the track, some 50 ride bikes that were still going around, Johnny tipped off. And I'm definitely not questioning whether it was oil or whatever it was, but he fell over.
In the spot where the oil was dumped.
Yes. Yeah. I think he fell off in a spot where the rider basically got off the track, got back on the track, even because CERT was so, well, you got to remember, this is a team that's trying to win the world championship. So whatever, and sometimes at night, I'm not going to even give the guy from CERT benefit of the doubt, because from everything I heard, it was the biggest bonehead move ever that he even thought about getting back on the track. None of that even matters to me. The fact that Johnny fell, that sucks in and of itself, because if they bring the pace car out the second that they knew that there was a bike that had blown its guts all over the place, they bring the pace car out, Kawasaki wins the race automatically. The problem is that isn't how it was handled. So Yamaha, Honda, and then FCC Honda France, the current world endurance champions at the time, they go to the podium. They do a full podium ceremony. Yamaha wins their 4th or 5th Suzuka 8-hour in a row, and this and that. And it was only an hour or so later, two hours later, that Kawasaki got reinstated because they went back a lap prior. And obviously Johnny was leading. There's just a shroud of controversy over this race. And it's to take nothing away from Cowie, take nothing away from any of the competitors. I just thought it was ironic that a red flag got thrown and the race didn't actually go a full 8 hours, because endurance is all about going around the clock at a 24-hour full distance. And I'd never seen a red flag in all the years that I'd ever raced endurance before. And with it raining a little bit, there's a question of, did we tip over in the rain? Did we tip over in the oil? That's not something that I'm even willing to go down, because I'm going to give Johnny Ray the benefit of the doubt all day.
You have
because you have to. I mean, like,
he knows what he's doing.
But I think from a race control standpoint, this was an unprecedented move. Greg, I did a race in Albacete, Spain, just to put it in perspective. It poured rain. I'm saying it poured rain from the time we started. We couldn't even do a running across the track start because it was that treacherous. So they started us behind the pace car, which I don't think I've ever seen before in any world endurance race other than that specific year that I was racing. So I started the race. And I want to say about 25, 30 minutes into this race, they had a red flag. I'm sorry, they had a bike crash, oil all over the track. And for an hour and a half, we had a pace car situation.
Yeah, so no red flag.
Zero red flag.
Right.
For an hour and a half. And I'm not kidding. It was an hour and a half. Greg, the pace car spun out in front of us.
Oh.
Okay, that's how much water was on the track.
Wait a second. So you're saying you're already out for 20 minutes, and then you're an hour and a half, and you're riding around at a car speed, and the car was going so fast they spun around.
Car wasn't even going that fast. There was so much standing water on the track. The race should have been called. It rained from the time I got off the plane to the time I left. I mean, it literally never dried one time. And this specific race that they decided to run that year, they started it at 6 o'clock in the evening and it went till 2 o'clock in the morning. So it was an 8 hour. And my first stint, Greg, was 3 hours long.
Oh, yuck.
And it was freezing cold, by the way. God. It was freezing cold. And I know, you look like the old guy telling old stories, but God's honest truth, I literally had my left glove off, stuffed between my legs, and I was putting my hand over the motor to keep my hands warm because my hands were so freezing. Yep. Okay. Mm-hmm. And my first stint was 3 hours long. I ended up running 6 hours of the 8 hours that night. Oh. And the funny part about that race was, if there was a race that should have been red flagged and possibly even called, it should have been that one. So that's why I found it weird that they bring a red flag out with sort of 5 minutes left in this race. But Kawasaki goes on to win and breaks Yamaha's streak. And not only that, it's the first time Kawasaki has won that very prestigious race. It's the first time they've won it since 1993 with Scott Russell. So it was a huge win for Kawasaki. Huge win for them. And in a race that, if you watched it, the top three bikes were within 10, 12 seconds of each other the entire time. A lot of time the leaders were back and forth going against each other. It was such a great race. And it was just a shame that when I woke up the next morning, I woke up to reading about some of this stuff and seeing everything that went on. And Cert ends up losing the championship to SRC Kawasaki, who had crashed. They finished 7 laps down to Kawasaki, France, and they went on to win the championship.
Wow.
Crazy race.
No better way to get track time, though, Jay, is there, than racing endurance? I don't care if it's on little bikes, big bikes. Absolutely the best, isn't it?
If you get a chance to do it, you got to do it.
I got to tell a little story about 2007. Yeah. Melissa Paris and I did an endurance, together on Hondas. And we went to, where were we? Putnam Park, I think. And it was raining. And we put her out on that bike. And that poor girl did 2 hours or something on that bike. And this is a Wera endurance race. And the only reason she even got to stop was because a red flag came out. And in that situation, she said, I was just staring we still had the fuel light on the bike. I mean, we had the stock dash and everything else. And you were just waiting for the fuel light to come on because we had no idea. We didn't calculate fuel and do laps. You just went till the light started flashing. Then you put your hand in the air to let the crew know you're coming in. Yep. So she just kept going around and around in the rain. And that was like her big deal. And she still cusses us out for that one.
Oh yeah. Begging for the fuel light to come on. I've been there. And
begging.
What's even worse is that I used to always tell the teams that I rode for one team way back in the day, Phase 1 Endurance. They used to weigh their fuel. So they'd weigh it after each rider got off. They'd empty the tank and weigh to see how much each rider was using compared to the other. And I always thought that was a very fascinating way of doing it. And I thought it was the smartest way to do it because guys are different. People are different how they ride. And my fear was a lot of teams will do that when the fuel light comes on, the countdown goes and it gets down to L5, L4, L3. Well, obviously at L5 or L4, if the fuel light comes on, you got to come in. You're not going to wait for it to go L1 and then LN. You're going to try to let your team know, hey, I'm coming in early. But my biggest fear was always the fact that what if the fuel light breaks? What if it doesn't work?
Yeah, good point.
And then it happened to me a couple times. Late in my career, it happened twice where my teammates were getting called in and the fuel light hadn't come on. So they're like, well, we're just going to keep running it. And I'm standing out there in my leathers waiting for them to come in. And I'm saying, you know what? The light's finally not working. We're hosed. And sure as shit, the thing runs out of fuel. So,
yeah. Oh, man. And then, and when this is world endurance, like you're talking about Suzuki 8 hour, it's like if the bike breaks down in turn 8 of 16, you got to push the bike back. You can't like have someone give you a ride back, right? You got to keep the bike in the race circuit. So yeah, crazy.
Yep.
All right. Well, controversy Suzuki 8 hour, but still congratulations to Kawasaki and Johnny Ray and Leon Haslam. It was a great race.
Great race. And taking nothing away. Look, either one of those three teams that we mentioned deserved to win. All three of them deserved to win. So it's not like, but I just thought it was funny that the red flag had stopped that race. And, but congrats. I mean, Johnny Ray and Leon Haslam did the entire race on their own, just the two of them. Tremendous effort.
Let's shift gears for a second, Jason, and move on over to American Flat Track because AFT raced the Buffalo Chip TT in Sturgis, South Dakota on August 4th, just a couple days ago from where we are. And it was a very, very interesting race, the TT. And for the second time this year, JD Beach, obviously of MotoAmerica fame, wins a Twins main event. And he won that by 0.2 of a second over Jake Johnson. Jared Mees 8 seconds back. So teammates, two Yamahas winning, then Jared Mees in third spot. Larry Pegram was in this one. PJ Jacobson finished 6th. So some familiar names on the road racing side of things. Roger Hayden finished 2 laps down. He was in it. But Jay, the interesting thing about this race is that Jake Johnson, who is known to be a TT kind of guy, had kind of walked away from everybody, and JD was hanging back. And with a couple laps to go, he kind of reeled him in, and he got to him on the last lap. And JD was there, but there was no room to pass. And coming out of the last corner, Jake Johnson had a problem with his bike, and JD motored right on through to take the win. So it was, it was a bit of a heartbreaker for Jake, and but for JD, the win. So congratulations to him. And also, Jay, I want to just mention, though, that on the single side of things, Ryan Sipes took the victory. That
guy's amazing, by the way.
Right? Amazing.
Yeah. That guy's amazing.
Congratulations to Ryan Sipes. Maybe you guys recognize James Rispoli. He finished 6th in that one. Andy DeBrino from Oregon. Another road. Yeah, finished 10th. So Nick McFadden actually was in that race too. He was 17, 10 laps down. I'm not sure what happened to Nick. I didn't get to talk to him about it. But so Jay, let's go back to JD Beach and his win. Last time we saw JD win, he came out and then won a MotoAmerica race, didn't he?
Yeah, you're right.
I'm just saying.
Boy, I tell you, I'd love to see that again. Sonoma could be a good track for JD. I think that, look, the fact that JD is just doing what he does and his schedule is as crazy as it is. And thank you for bringing me up to speed, because I've really been trying to watch the flat track stuff this year, but obviously I was at the racetrack all weekend and I wasn't able to catch it. But it's the guy is an unreal motorcycle rider, but I'm sure in his brain that he's thinking that to himself too, like, I won weekend prior to VIR in Phoenix. Maybe this is going to be good. So no, it'd be great to see him obviously get up front again this weekend.
Now we're recording this on Tuesday.
Yeah.
In the afternoon. They're actually racing tonight. So they have another race that's going on this evening, Black Hills. So, we'll see how that goes. We won't obviously have that information.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to catch that. It feels weird being a Tuesday. That feels so weird being a Tuesday, right? And there,
I know.
Yeah.
And they got racing, but it's great. So yeah, good luck to everybody racing tonight in that one for sure.
Yep.
Well, flat track is always good fun.
We kind of brought it up a little bit earlier, Greg, so I don't want to rehash it too much, but obviously we got Red Bull Ring this weekend, MotoAmerica this weekend, but the Red Bull Ring should be an interesting race. But yeah, I think that we've got a lot of great racing starting tonight. Like you say, we get to watch some dirt track this evening, and then you and I are headed off to MotoAmerica And boy, Greg, we're at that stage now with MotoAmerica where the races are going to go by so quick. You and I are going to be sitting
I know.
We're going to be sitting in Pittsburgh in 2 weeks going, wait a minute, we only got 2 more rounds after this, and
I know
it's gone by fast, but we've still got some great racing ahead of us. And I'm looking forward to watching the Red Bull Ring in Austria this weekend with MotoGP as well.
All right, Jay. Well, this is time for Quick Shift presented by ARAI Helmets. And, it's riding season right now, folks. Right? It is hot outside. So you want to get yourself an ARAI helmet because the high quality of materials, the vents that are designed into the higher end helmets, the shields. And by the way, it doesn't matter what level of ARAI helmet you use. They're all the same protection. So make sure you go check out ARAIAmericas.com for how to properly fit your helmet to your head. All the different color schemes that they have. Get yourself a cue ball, get yourself an orange one, doesn't matter. Check out ARAIAmericas.com. Get yourself a new helmet because your head, well, you deserve it. All right, Jay, so Quick Shift presented by ARAI, and this is the segment where we're going to read some stuff real quick, and then it's over and you stop talking and all that good stuff. So as we get into this thing, Jason, did you see the Alonso Lopez crash and incident after the crash?
What incident?
Did you get to see that? Yeah, I know. Well, what happened is that the FIM, the MotoGP stewards, they came out with a sanction on Lopez and have said that he has to start from pit lane. Now, I know you saw it, so why don't you kind of describe what happened? What do you think about what happened and the penalty assessed?
Well, first off, Garcia, he just kind of got underneath his teammate and took him out. Okay, it sucks. It happens. Greg, you know my view on this. Drives me nuts. And Lopez essentially, both riders get up. Lopez comes over and essentially shoves him about as hard as you just push somebody standing on the edge of a pool. Okay? In my opinion.
Yep.
Why does race direction even get involved in this crap? I
don't know.
It makes me crazy. Look, there is emotion. You see it. Nobody's out looking for a fight. But when you're pissed off about getting cleaned out in a race, and you know that the guy's standing up and you think he's okay. And I know everybody's going to go, well, you don't know if he had a broken neck. You don't know if he had a broken vertebrae, and he got shoved. Look, it's not like the guy was sitting on the ground and the guy kicked him, or the guy was writhing in pain and the guy shoved him or did anything like that. He was mad. He was walking past him, barely shoved him. And what's the sanction for the next? Oh, he's got to start from pit lane. Like, just stupid. Yeah. Like, give me a break. You don't think that Sergio Garcia is going to go take a little bit of ration of crap from his team for taking out his teammate? You don't think that those two guys know each other so well they're going to be in a truck together having to discuss this afterwards? I really don't understand in all of this stuff why race control has to continuously get involved and continuously say it was so funny, Greg, because I was teaching that day and I saw you sent me an email and it said Alonso Lopez and it didn't, and I didn't read it because I didn't want to know the results, obviously, of the races that day. And so that night I got home late and I'm kind of watching the Moto3 race and I'm got my eye on Alonso Lopez only because of the email that you sent me. I'm kind of like wondering.
Sorry about that.
No. I'm just kind of wondering. I wonder what's going to happen here. I wonder did he win? Did he crash? Did he take somebody out? Kind of what's going on. And when I saw that, then I realized why you sent it to me, because you probably sent it to me thinking like, oh yeah, I can already tell what Jason's going to say about this.
Oh yeah.
So anyways,
100%.
Yeah, crap. Alex Rins had some harsh words about the Michelin tires this weekend, Greg. The head of Michelin went on and had a talk with Suzuki about Rins needing to learn how to express himself, reports GP1.com. What do you think about that?
This is that whole thing, man. I mean, it's like, why, I don't know, why put a gag order? A couple things. Number one, why you got to go tell on Rins? Why not just go have a talk with Rins? And then the whole gag order thing. If Rins, I don't know. I'm torn about this, Jason, because as Rins has had a couple of bad weekends, he's kind of coming out as a little bit of a whiner. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, if Rins is saying, look, man, that the Michelins just didn't hold up, then they didn't hold up. I understand the whole money thing. I understand that Michelin's a big sponsor and it's a tire control tire. It's just, I don't know. Okay. It's one of those things where I'm kind of torn on it, going like, dude, just, what are you doing? Why are you going to tattletale on the guy?
My view. Love. I just interrupted you, by the way. Did you catch that? I just totally just told you to shut up, G-Dub. Here it is. No,
I'm
you're not. You're not
joking.
dinging and going
I'm
to the next
joking.
one yet. That guy finished 11th at Le Mans and put it on himself and said, "Hey, it's me. I screwed. Didn't have our stuff together this weekend. Whatever." When you're going to be a one brand series and you try to put a gag order on every racer, it's really it's a tough thing to do. And I know everybody's sensitive these days, and I realize everybody has not got thick skin, but if a guy comes out and says, my tire went off, my tire wasn't that good, my tire, it's not saying that the brand is crap. It's not saying that it's one race. I mean, the same way that these guys are going to say, man, my tires were great. Like, you don't see these guys sending out, hey, I need to go talk to Rins about not talking about the tires being that good, right? It's I just get so over all these. We just live in a world now where everybody cries about something and bitches and moans, and it's like, if the tire sucked for Rins and it was on the right side and he ended up not getting on the podium as a racer, when do these things get said the most, Greg? Do they get said 2 weeks later, or do they get said within the hour after the race?
Within the hour, the passion, you know what I mean?
So there's emotion and there's all
Yeah.
these things that a rider says. He's not coming out and saying the tires are absolute garbage. He's not saying that, hey, all of you people out in the world, don't go buy Michelin because my tire today on my MotoGP bike, that's a special bike that none of you can even think about swinging a leg over, was crap. So all Michelin tires. It's not saying that. I don't understand this. It's all the people I hang out with, including yourself, and just about everybody I could think of, we all just shake our heads and wondering why everybody's so sensitive to everything all the time.
Yeah.
Makes me crazy.
Yeah,
so,
it makes me crazy too.
Yeah.
All right.
But anyways, that's my view. Sorry.
No, it's good. It's good.
Carry on.
Yeah. All right. Last one here. Did you get to see the little Rins Marquez dust up though? That was on the track with qualifying. Rins stuffed, Marquez real quick. Or did you see that whole thing?
Well, I heard Rins stuff Marquez, and then Marquez kind of stuffed him back, and then they came in the pits together, and Rins kind of did a little swerve job in the pits.
Well, and Marquez, they had it on board. Marquez kind of put his hand on his lower back to give him a little bit of room or whatever. So anyway, GP1.com had a little bit of an interview, and in that, Marquez had words about the quote unquote skirmish with Rins during the qualifying session. Here's what he had to say. He said, quote, I told him I didn't want to slow him down, Marquez concluded. And he continued on by saying, and he apologized for what he told the press. People have to understand that we're all young riders, myself included. We're still learning. And I've always had a very good relationship with Rins. I don't have friends on the track because I race for myself, but outside we respect each other and give each other a handshake. So I wanted to bring that up because I kind of knew where you would go with your answer from the question before. Mm-hmm. So, with what Marquez said,
you set me up.
Not really set you up, but because I think, so anyway, the question for you is, with that in mind of what I just read about Marquez's quote, what do you think about that?
It's funny because it seems like Marquez says the right things and does the right things and kind of like a lot of times, but I hear a lot of people, you hear a lot of stuff that Marquez just kind of puts a big happy face on and he does it for, TV, he does it for press and all that stuff. But behind the scenes, he's not maybe that way. Good. Who cares? He's trying to win world championships. He's in a very tough sport. Everybody's gunning for the guy. There was a guy named Valentino Rossi at one point that everybody said was a jerk and he was this and that. But where would MotoGP be without Valentino Rossi? Where would MotoGP be right now without Marc Marquez? So I have no problem with him having little dust ups because you know what? It just adds intrigue to the race. I mean,
Jason, where would MotoGP be if they had a paddock full of people who were passive? You know what I mean? Oh, sorry, you go ahead and pass me. Oh, I don't want to get in your way. You know what I mean? So it's
couldn't
racing.
Agree more.
It's racing.
Yeah, like everybody bitches about back in the day about Mladen. He was just such a jerk. He says that this and that. Yeah, Matt Mladen increased everybody's wages. Matt Mladen was the guy that other manufacturers wanted to go beat, so they were out trying to hire the best riders. So everybody's wages went up. Like, let's not forget why and who he was. He didn't need to be a nice guy. He was winning races. It was his job to put money on the table and whatever the case is. You could just go right down like Carl Fogarty, Mick Doohan. Hey, to an extent, our own president, Wayne Rainey. You see Wayne now, and I can't even believe it's the same guy that people said was as cutthroat as he was back in the day. But that's because they were doing a job.
Doing a job, young, aggressive, you know what I mean? Like all those things. And their job was to go win races. Go win races so we can go sell whatever. Helmets, gloves, motorcycles.
Yeah, and Kevin Schwantz back in the day was the guy that was always smiling. He was like this big rival to Wayne, and Wayne was kind of known as sour. Or this Eddie Lawson known as sour and bitter and this, but it's the way it is. When you're a competitive athlete, it doesn't matter what it is. You do what you got to do to win. So yeah, I got
chew on this for a second, Jay. This is one of those things that I've always thought about racing that is so weird. In a society that we live in that is very litigious here in the United States, everything goes wrong, just sue, sue, sue. Don't you find it very interesting that you can go out on your motorcycle? Like, doesn't matter if it's track day, obviously a race. No one has ever said to me, like, hey, if someone cleans you out, they're not paying your bill. It's on you. It's like something that you just kind of know. Mm-hmm. And so here you are, you put your money or your hard-earned whatever. Even as a race team, you have your budgets. As a rider, you're putting in all the effort and everything else. And someone cleans you out, and it's just on you. You know, it's
so crazy.
It's cool that it works like that. But on the other hand, occasionally emotions are going to get involved. There is no way around it because the amount of sacrifice it takes to be at the top of the sport or just to be involved in the sport, whether it's from the rider side. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that don't want to have to eat mung beans and tofu and go running every single day, but it's part of their job, you know, and all the teams and the travel and the families that sacrifice by having these mechanics go away, all so we can satisfy this need to win or to go racing or, you know, whatever it is. Right. And it's like, true. And then all of a sudden it's like, true, wait a second, emotion got involved. Everybody just calm down, take a breath. It's like, I don't know. Every now and then someone needs to shove somebody. That's all I'm saying. All right.
I agree. The whole Fanati thing came up the other day, and I'm like, it was a big deal last year. You and I both thought he should be banned. He did get banned. But let me ask you a question. If it would have been old school days back in the day and Monzi would have literally ran over to the pits and punched him in the mouth, I think most people would have been like, sure, let Fanati race the next race. Who cares? You know what I mean? Just get it out of the way, punch him in the mouth, tell him how you feel about it. And then everybody would then feel like, well, he kind of got what was coming to him. Yeah, sure, let him line up for the next race. Let him ride up for the next race.
But the bottom line is we don't live in that world anymore. And you and I are not dinosaurs. We're evolving with the times. And so we get what we get in racing, and everybody's still trying to sort their way through it. So racing is...
That's a rant. That's a G-Dub and JP rant we just went on. You know that.
Yeah, listen, racing is still awesome. Everybody loves it. So it's race calendar time. So go out and watch some racing this weekend. MotoAmerica is at Sonoma Raceway for round 7. That's a Saturday, Sunday only race. So please come on out and see Jason and myself, the entire paddock. We'd love to have you there. It's going to be full of all kinds of stuff to do away from the racetrack as well. Saturday night, Jason, up the road in Sacramento, American Flat Track is going to be at the Cal Expo Fair. So if you have time after spending the day with us, shoot on up there. I think the main is like somewhere around 8 o'clock at night or something like that. So plenty of time to get from MotoAmerica up to Flat Track. That's a big race weekend in NorCal. MotoGP, of course, is in Austria at Red Bull Ring in Spielberg. Pro Motocross, Jason, is back in action in New York at Unadilla. Kawasaki's Eli Tomac leads the championship by 50 with 3 rounds to go. AMA National Speedway races up City of the Industries in California on Sunday, and so much more. So check that out. All right, Jay, we nailed this one, I think, pretty well. We hope you enjoyed it. Anything you want to say on the way out?
I got a question. One last question, G-Dub.
Mm-hmm.
Does JD Beach have the helicopter fired up to get from Sonoma to Sacramento Mile?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Tune in next week. We'll let you know, huh?